Hi, my name is Stuart Ironside. I'm a classical guitarist. I've been playing for 14 years now, and I play a mixture of styles incorporating all my influences from around the world. I didn't really grow up with a musical community around me. My parents aren't particularly musical. I played classical guitar up to university, and everything that I found out musically in that point I did through my own interest and my own curiosity of discovery. And that really carried on into university. So I was classically trained up to that point, and then I discovered Javanese gamelan and West African kora music in my undergraduate and fell in love with them. And I wanted to try and find a middle ground between classical music and these non-Western traditions that I was really interested in. There was always a missing piece of how do I do that. And later on, after I graduated, I discovered English folk music, and I found that to be a wonderful middle ground between these semi-improvised traditions and the core technique of classical music. I kept trying to find this middle ground in other people's writing and compositions, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And eventually, when the COVID lockdowns came around, I decided, with all this time on my hands, I would have to be the one to find this middle ground myself. And that's what I started to do. So I was trying to use the technical language I developed as a classical guitarist to marry all of these musical influences of classical music, Javanese gamelan, West African kora and English folk into something that was a coherent whole. And then that bled into my compositions and my other arrangements of music as well, and is now a language that I feel acknowledges all of my influences and my teachers up to this point, but is still speaking for me as a musician. It's hard to pick a favourite track on the album, but I'd say the most representative one is the Wallace Line. The title for this comes from a theory developed by the naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace of a line running through the islands of Indonesia that separates the flora and fauna on one side with distinctly Asian influences and the other side with distinctly Australian influences. And I found this idea really poetic as a musician, a clear line of musical style running through a track, but there are clear lines of influence and areas of influence in my different musical languages coming through. And I tried to really capture this on the title track. I think it's very representative of what I was trying to achieve with the whole album. It's hard for me to describe what the style of the album is. The only thing I can really say is that it's technically classical guitar music, but it incorporates musical influences from such a wide sonic palette, and it's kind of filtered through my own lens of what I want to create and the language I'm trying to express, that to describe it as any one thing wouldn't really do it justice. I suppose the only thing I can say is you'll have to listen and decide for yourselves. So because I started the process of combining these musical elements and doing the writing and arranging of the music that would become this album during the first COVID lockdown, by the time it was finished and I was ready to record it, we were still in the COVID lockdown. So I really had no choice but to do the whole thing myself. And it was quite challenging not having access to a studio or a producer or any engineers. It was just me with some microphones in a back room and having to do all the editing and the recording myself. Really honed into focus what I wanted to say on the album. I knew I couldn't be like I would be on a standard record project where I would be able to do multiple takes of something and kind of splice them together and choose the best version. I had one or two chances to really say what I wanted to say with each song, which was quite nerve-wracking but also quite freeing. That pressure really allowed me to be quite free in my playing, and I think that comes across really well on the album. It's very natural and it has a very live feel to it, which is what I really wanted the album to feel like.
In some ways it was quite a musically restrictive time for me, having the access to communities of musicians and producers and friends that I had built up over the years completely cut off. Was quite daunting, but one of the real saving graces was being able to go out into the countryside of Oxfordshire, just being able to sit with nature, sit out in the open space and play as endlessly as I wanted to. Really helped me to crystallise and think about what it is I was trying to say on the album and how I wanted the music to come across, and it was a real saving grace for my mind to be able to do that with as much freedom as I wanted to. The other byproduct of this was that spending so much time in the countryside of Oxfordshire really forced me to think about my roots as a person from this county, and it was something I was doing already, but it really made me think about the folk music of this wonderful county and really engage with it in a way that I hadn't before, and it made me properly confront the fact of my origins as a person from Oxfordshire and how I represent that within music. And I like to think that's represented on the two arrangements of wonderful folk songs on this album, Near Woodstock Town and Mayday Carol. The melody is still preserved, but it is still done in a way that feels true to me and feels true to every other kind of music that I'm especially enamoured with.
The mission statement of this album is in some ways a process of looking back as well as looking forward. I wanted it to be a clear point of reference for these are the things that have influenced me and really fed into my musical being up to this point. And this is my acknowledgement of that, while also being a first stopping point of what I want to continue to play in the future and what I want to keep creating on the guitar and what I have to say as a musician. I want it to be something that acknowledges the past and also is a hopeful look into the future. So the other mission statement, or I suppose aim with the album, is to show other guitarists what is possible on the instrument. We have this wonderful contraption that is capable of playing so many styles of music and creating so many sounds that we don't have to stick to the same Segovia repertoire as classical guitarists, or we don't have to play the same songs that everyone else is playing. We can go out and find something and create something new of ourselves as musicians.